This iMac has spent a considerable amount of time outside, judging by its condition. You might recognize this iMac as one of the 3 I recently picked up for free from Facebook Marketplace. I upgraded the larger of the 3 with modern Apple Silicon internals. My subscribers may also recognize the other 2 from a now deleted video in which I attempted to get them working. I wanted to revisit these iMacs and finally get one working with its original internals. They're covered in all sorts of grime, some of which has made its way inside the computer. From the fine dirt and cobwebs, I'd say it was kept in a shed, but then again, it's got literal mud on the base. Maybe they just spent some time outside before being listed on Marketplace, or maybe the shed had a water leak and a dirt floor. Who knows? Removing the base, we can gain access to the user upgradable section. This is where you'd upgrade the RAM or add in a Wi-Fi card. There's a loose screw floating around in here, which is already a sign that someone has taken apart this iMac. Worse is that the plastic sheet that covers the exposed motherboard has been torn off. But with 4 more screws, we're able to separate the 2 halves of this computer. And it's a good thing I did, because there's not a single cable plugged in. I'll open up the second iMac while we're at it. This one is missing the bottom plate and 2 screws. But at least this time round something's plugged in. But there's still a loose Molex connector floating around, so something clearly isn't. Sure enough, the drive bay lifts out as it's missing all the screws, revealing there's no hard drive in this iMac. Before we fire it up for a test, it's probably a good idea to clean up the internals a bit to give them the best chance of working. Removing the earth lead, you can see where the missing screw from the other iMac came from. I'll get everything unplugged from the motherboard so we can properly inspect it and give it a much needed clean. Looking at the logic board, there's a lot of dust and dirt, but looking closer you can see signs of rust and corrosion. So my hope of this logic board is quite low, but I'll attempt to revive it anyway using an ultrasonic cleaner. Ultrasonic cleaners work by the use of ultrasonic vibration, which is supposed to be a great way of cleaning. I've used this machine to clean a carburetor, although it took a few runs and some manual scrubbing to loosen up stubborn grime. I've never used it to clean electronics, so you might say this is an excellent opportunity to try. And even after just one pass on half the board, you can see it's already made an improvement. It's not perfect, so I'll finish it off using some isopropyl alcohol and a brush to try and remove the rest of the dirt and corrosion. I should also inspect the power supply. While I hope it doesn't go up in smoke when I plug it in, I really don't know what kind of condition it's in. And you know what? It actually looks pretty good. With a bit of a clean, I think it'll work again. But get a look at that fan. We can't power it up looking like that. A bit of manual cleaning power will take care of that. With that, we can clean up the other iMac in the exact same way before reassembling them for a test. I have 3 motherboards in total, 2 from these iMacs and 1 from the M1 converted iMac. I'll start with the original boards for each iMac and see where that gets us. I'll just be temporarily attaching them without the bases. This does mean part of the heatsink isn't attached, but I just want to see if we get any signs of life. And for our first board we get nothing. No fans, no chime, no signs of life. For the second board, it's also no chime, no fans, and an unhappy power supply that sounds like it's arcing. The last board was from the M1 converted iMac. It's in bad shape with one of its pins bent on the main interconnect connector, which had to be straightened before I could even install the board. But with it plugged in, I couldn't believe what I heard. It actually chimed, but there's a bigger issue than just a bent pin. This board has no LCD connector, it's completely missing. So I'll have to salvage one from the boards with no power and transfer it across. Soldering tiny things on complex motherboards is not my specialty. Soldering a through-hole component or some wire together, no problem, but shrink down a connector with pins about the size of a human hair, and I find it a bit difficult. But I must have done something right because the computer chimed and the display lit up. Although very green looking at the beginning, it did clear up substantially. But the success was short-lived, as that connector I had worked on getting perfectly connected broke off the board. There's supposed to be a locking plate that attaches over the top to prevent the connector from breaking off under the tension of the cable, which I didn't have, and surprisingly there's quite a bit of tension on that little wire. So I switched it off and reattached the connector, this time adding some glue on the sides to help hold it down a bit better. I was in fact so confident at this point that I properly reassembled the internals of this iMac. And with a press of a power button, the fan spin up and... no chime, no display. I began troubleshooting with different RAM, a different power supply. Nothing I did changed anything. So I put the iMac away for a month or two and came back to it again. When I pressed the power button this time, it chimed but gave us 3 beeps. Which is apparently something to do with RAM, but even with different RAM, it didn't fix the issue. In fact, now it no longer chimes at all. I did think that maybe it needed a power supply from a larger iMac, as this board may need more power than these small little iMac power supplies can deliver. So I grabbed another power supply and installed it in the Mac. But unfortunately, it still didn't work. This is where I initially gave up. I had exhausted all avenues, and even a professional board repairer couldn't find anything obviously wrong with it. It wasn't until I was putting them back together with their original parts for storage when I decided to try and power one of the other boards back up that initially had no power after cleaning. To my surprise, it started right up. Whether it initially had a power supply issue or the board wasn't dried properly after cleaning when I first attempted to power it on, I don't really know. But now we're met with a flashing question mark. This indicates the drive either has no operating system or the drive is faulty. Hoping that the previous owner has just erased the drive, I'll proceed to try and get an OS installed. Holding the mouse button down while starting the Mac will open the disk tray and allow us to place the installation CD into the tray. However, I didn't anticipate for the DVD drive to not read the disk. I had 3 of these iMac DVD drives, all with signs of corrosion inside. Drive 1 was so seized the tray was jammed. One would spin up but wouldn't read the disk, and the other wouldn't even spin up the disk. I attempted to get them working, testing each one before I went to the trouble of installing it into the iMac. However, I couldn't get any of them working properly. But hope is not lost, as Apple created a way to connect another Mac's internal hard drive to another computer using FireWire. I connected a FireWire cable between the iMac and a PowerBook G4, then booted the iMac into target disk mode by pressing the T key on boot. So I'll have to install a new copy of macOS 10, using a retail CD placed into the PowerBook. In the setup, we can choose the external FireWire drive for the OS to be installed on. Therefore, it will install directly to the iMac rather than the PowerBook. I've chosen macOS 10.3 as it's compatible with both computers. As if it wasn't compatible with the PowerBook, it wouldn't allow us to install, but if it's not compatible with the iMac wouldn't boot after installation. Once the setup had completed, I could reboot the iMac out of target disk mode and watch it discover the newly installed OS and boot into macOS for the first time. Once the setup is complete, we can see this iMac G4 is an 800MHz version with 256MB of RAM and an 80GB hard drive. So we've finally gotten this iMac working, so I think it deserves a clean. So let's take care of that next. I'll be using my patented cleaning method, also known as toothpaste, to polish and whiten this iMac, while also hopefully removing some of the marks and what looks like mold growing around the display's bezel. I've used this method on discolored white plastic before with great success, plus it leaves a fantastic smell. So sit back and enjoy the sounds of cleaning this iMac. And we're done. So this is it, a 2002 iMac G4, saved, cleaned and restored to working condition. There's still some marks left behind which will always tell the tale of its not so kind past. Still, I'm amazed at how it's turned out. As for the other iMac, it's also been cleaned up, however will remain as a parts iMac as I already have removed its LCD connector, meaning even if the board begins working, it would still need further repair. I did explore the contents of the other hard drive from the iMac we didn't get working. While I don't know the password, the hint thankfully told me what it was, simply just the name of the user account. Once we were in, we could get an idea of what this computer was used for. This computer was last used on the 26th of May 2009 and is loaded with various kids' games. And the list of applications on the computer do include some kids' games, but also some utility software, indicating that there was an adult using this computer at some point. Did you know Microsoft used to make a Windows Media Player and Internet Explorer for Mac? In fact, in earlier versions of macOS, there wasn't even Safari, just Internet Explorer. In the disk drive is none other than my first ABCs and spelling. Saving 2 of the 3 roadside iMacs is definitely a win, especially considering this computer is one of Apple's best designs. Before we finish off, I'd like to make mention to my app iTest. If you're a phone repairer, buyer or seller, test it with iTest. Providing hardware testing for a phone's important functions, including the touchscreen, light and proximity sensors, compass, gyroscope, and much more. It also has the ability to check for voice over LTE and verify hardware specifications for Android devices. Available for both iOS and Android, download iTest today. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffreys video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the restoration playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.